Hello. Since it first opened its doors in 1997, Games Workshop's publishing imprint Black Library has explored the worlds of Warhammer through comic books, novels, short stories, anthologies, magazines, and just so much more. They are telling stories that are simply too big for the tabletop. My guest today, Matt Ralphs, joined the Black Library to help lead the creation of special projects, contributing stories not just to the anthology magazine Inferno, but also creating immersive in-universe fiction, books that were actually taken from the universe of 40k or Warhammer Fantasy. The Imperial Infantryman's Uplifting Primer, to the Guide to the Sabbat Worlds, to the Life of Sigmar. These in-universe artefacts that were gifted to us in our world from the worlds of Warhammer have been some of the finest output from Games Workshop and the Black Library since it began. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm in conversation with former Black Library author and editor, Matt Ralphs. Matt, thank you so much for joining me. It is great to have you here to chat about your amazing career working both at Games Workshop and creating, these really fascinating books in the worlds of Games Workshop, and then beyond that as well. We're going to get into all of that sort of stuff. But I suppose a great place to start would just be, what was your first encounter with Warhammer? When did you become aware of this world?
I think, for a start, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's lovely to talk to you, Jordan. Thank you for inviting me on. I would say that I think it was when I was at school, probably just the beginning of secondary school, I would think that I first became aware of Games Workshop. And it was probably, most of my friends there were all pretty nerdy, pretty geeky, into the same kind of thing. So I think we all kind of fell into it at roughly the same time. And I think the thing that kind of got its hooks into me most strongly was poring over Rogue Trader. Although my mate had a copy, and we'd all kind of fight over it. And then I managed to get my own copy, which I think not this one. I managed to get this from a boot fair for about £5. Wow. But I remember just poring over the pages, just not so much learning the rules, but just looking at the amazing images and just the world that it created, all the background, all the little kind of bits of color text, all the little bits of in-universe stuff that I just thought was just amazing. And it just felt like such a huge place that they'd created with all these different races and creatures and weapons and everything else. And it just hooked me immediately. And this was definitely a formative text, and it's one I hold very dear. Like, the artwork inside is so varied and esoteric. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, obviously, it's totally out of date now. I mean, I imagine there's probably not much in here that correlates with the modern stuff. I would imagine it's gone through so many changes, but sure. Just the artwork on the cover and everything, it just spoke to me in the way that, so, certain things do, like Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, that spoke to me in a similar kind of way. But with this, you can actually get involved with it. You can get into it with your friends, and you can, when you're playing the tabletop battle game, you can kind of, influence the world, only in your own imagination, but you do actually have an influence over it. Your battle gets defeated by the orcs or whatever, and it all kind of becomes part of the 40k history in its own little way. At least it did to my adolescent brain anyway. And then, buying White Dwarf, poring over the articles, and being insanely jealous of the people who could actually paint the models in a way that made them look good, rather than my terrible efforts at dry brushing and inking and, all that kind of stuff. And it was at school, and we played the games. We all bought different armies, and we'd all play each other. And it was a way to bond with people as well. It was something to share. It was something which we could talk about a lot, and save up money, and because we didn't have very much money, so a little bit of pocket money every now and again, saving it up, deciding what to buy. Do I buy the pair of Terminators, or do I buy whatever you fancy? But and it was just these big decisions that you had to make, and it was just great. It was kind of something to obsess over, and I think boys like to obsess over things. Men, not just boys and men like to obsess over these sorts of things. And yeah, so that's how it was. It was at school, and it's never really left. There's always a bit of my brain thinking about that kind of thing, and looking back on it very fondly. Yeah, so formative. It was definitely a formative
Yeah,
experience.
it
Yeah.
sounds it. Yeah. I mean, were you reading a lot of like sci-fi and fantasy fiction around that time? You mentioned Tolkien. Were you getting into a lot of that stuff?
I think I was reading more fantasy than science fiction. So Tolkien, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings would have been probably before that. I would have read that when I was a little bit younger. But anything a bit otherworldly, and it's like Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, anything like that took me out of the world, the real world. I think I've always wanted that kind of escape into other worlds, whether it's space or a fantasy world. And this fitted into that perfectly, although it is very much its own thing. But yeah, that's always been my thing. I don't often read things in the real world. It's mostly fantastical in some way or other. And now I look at Warhammer generally. I can see where they've taken inspiration from classic sources, whether it's history, science fiction, or fantasy, and it's fun to see those connections and what they've done with it, and how they've changed it and twisted it to its own, and created their own thing, which I'm sure in itself influences lots of other things. It's all a big web of information and inspirations being passed around all over the place. So, and it's an inspiring. The worlds are inspiring. The characters are inspiring. So, yeah, I love it. I really do. It's actually been really fun thinking about it again when I'm thinking about talking to you again and talking to you and going, oh yeah, it's rekindled the interest and my sort of my love of it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, so when did you like move into like professional writing? Was that when you started working with Warhammer, or were you professionally writing before that?
No, not professionally writing. I always, I think as soon as I started reading stories from a young age, I always thought I would love to be able to do this. I would love to be able to write stories, or just be a writer for a living. But I had no idea how you went around doing that. I mean, we did an English literature degree, and I came out of that like most English literature degree students, going, "What the hell do I do now? This doesn't really go anywhere specific." So
Sure.
I kind of went from job to job. None of them really, it was just, well, I need the money, so I'll just take whatever job. I remember once I went into one of like a Reed employment agency, where they, where you go in and you register, and then they send you to do some sort of boring job. And when I was interviewing for it or getting registered, she said, "Oh, what sort of work would you like to do?" And I actually sat there with a straight face and said, "I want to do something that's really creative. I want to use my words." And she was like, "Right, you're going to be doing admin. You're going to be doing data entry, admin, whatever." But that's, so obviously I was very naive that I thought she was going to say, "Oh yeah, well, there's a job opening as a short story writer over there, so you can do that." But eventually, I think what got me, that led me to the Black Library, was when I noticed that they did, because when I first got into Games Workshop, Black Library didn't exist.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure the first books I think were done by Box Tree.
Even before then.
That's the other thing actually. What I did, one of the other things I loved when I was a kid, was some of the books that they did with Box Tree. So the Ian Miller ones.
Yeah.
So I read these, and these were also. They're not. I know they're not canon. Like they're like so far off what Warhammer is. But I remember reading these and just thinking they were amazing books.
Sure.
Like, really, really amazing worlds. But so Inferno magazine, which I have a copy of here. I don't know whether they still do it. I don't think they do.
They don't anymore. No.
So I'm sure you know what it is.
Sure.
But it was a bi-monthly magazine that came out, which was mostly short stories and sometimes comic strips and features, and some of them were written by sort of established writers like Dan Abnett and Clint Werner and people like that, but then they also had an open submissions policy at that time, and basically it was that you could send in your ideas as a complete unknown, as of course I was, and they might pay for you, they might pay to buy your story, and it was 5p a word, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, wow.
Now you'd never get 5p a word. In fact, at some point they reduced it down to 2 when I started working there. But 5p a word is actually quite a lot at the time. So I thought, well, that's a few £100. And Do you want me to talk about my first submission into
Please do.
Inferno?
Yeah, that would be fascinating. Yeah.
This is a very embarrassing story for me
Okay. Even
because
better.
even better, yeah. So, as I said, I hadn't actually done. I love stories, but I'd never really tried to write any, not properly. So I didn't really know how you did that either. So I tried to sit down and write a sort of a story submission, because what they wanted, as far as I can remember, the submission policy was they wanted a detailed synopsis of the story, the whole thing, so they knew what the story was, and about the first 500 words of the actual text itself, so they could judge the writing and the story, which is what the editors need to make a proper judgment. And of course, they get hundreds of submissions, hundreds, from all over the world, from people like me who desperately wanted to get published. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to ignore that. I'm just going to, because I'm going to send in something that's going to make them really curious and interested in what was going on in my brain at the time. So rather than come up with a story, I did a kind of weird in-universe sort of submission of strange goings on in a somewhere, and that there may be cults and everything will be revealed. And I did it in sort of Gothic text, Gothic typeface, centered, and as if it was a poster. And then just to make them really, really interested in in my work, I painted the borders with like colored ink to make it look like it was sort of some kind of artifact from the Warhammer 40,000, but entirely ignoring the idea that it's supposed to be a short story and they just want to read the short story. So I sent this in thinking it was brilliant. This is going to make them really fascinated in Matt Ralph's. And I think it did, but not in the way that I intended, because I got a rejection. I mean, clearly a rejection. I got a rejection from Richard Williams, who was the assistant editor at the time, who I replaced eventually, saying, well, thank you for your submission, you mad person. And I think I tried another one. I did the same thing again. I sent another submission in and it got rejected again, painted the borders with my acrylic paints, and it was just desperate. And I was very disappointed. Bearing in mind, I was also in my early 20s at this point, so I should have known better, but I didn't. And then when I got my second rejection, I thought, no, I need to do what they want me to do. And so I worked really hard, and I came up with a story, sent it in as in the way that they intended. And if there are any unpublished writers watching now, my first piece of advice to you would be always submit what the publisher wants you to submit. Don't deviate because you look like an idiot, which I did twice. But third time lucky, and they accepted it. And I was working at The Guardian at the time, and I remember when I got the news that it had been accepted by Christian Dunn, who was the editor of Inferno, I was so excited because my words were going to be printed, and it was printed in this edition. And there it is, my name there, Warp Spawn. That's my first ever published story. And I got paid however much money it was, a few £100. And yeah, it was a very satisfying, I managed to get through the sort of process and be accepted. So it was really good. That was the beginning of my writing career. So that's when it began. And yeah, that was my first words in print, and I got paid for it. And I could legitimately call myself a professional writer. And it was really exciting. It was a big moment. Yeah. And I'm always grateful to Christian and the team there for accepting my first proper submission and ignoring the first two, which were just, I've still got them actually. I can't show them because they're down at my mum and dad's house, unfortunately. But I look at them every now and again and just cringe. It's just, oh, what were you thinking?
I mean, it's quite creative though. That's a very fun approach, even if, yeah, it does ignore completely what you were asked to do.
yeah, totally ignored it. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, if I look at the thing, well, it's not without an imagination, but there's no story there. There's no story. It's just it was like reading the blurb of the back of a book. That's kind of what I sent. But as I said, in big Gothic text, because I thought, well, they'll like that. They'll obviously give me a novel deal for this.
I mean, maybe they did, because that's still quite impressive for your first proper submission, within the rules. Actually
Within the rules,
being picked up. That's that I'm sure, like you say, there's hundreds and probably thousands of submissions. So to even get through on that is really impressive. That's great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. They probably just felt sorry for me. We'll just shut him up. Just throw him a bone.
So did they then commission more work from you for Inferno?
Well, I can't. My memory is a bit hazy because I got one other story accepted called Blood and Sand, which I think only appeared in I don't think it appeared in Inferno, but it did come in. They did anthologies of Inferno stories, so I'm in here. But I
Right.
can't remember whether I did this when I was already there or whether it was before. But in the end, I got two short stories published for them. Yeah, and yeah, very proud moments. But I can't
Right.
remember when that was, whether I was already working there for that or not. But yeah, and then of course, we'll get onto these. But then I did some of the in-universe stuff as
Of
well.
course,
Yeah.
yeah. But then, so you joined Black Library in a permanent role, and that was what, an
Mm.
editorial position?
That's right. Yeah. So it couldn't have been very long after Warp Spawn was published, when they advertised for an assistant editor, and I thought, well, that's perfect. That's my into publishing, because I thought I realized then that I want to work in publishing, and not as a writer because I would never make enough money, but as an editor, that's kind of what I decided then I wanted to do. And here was my because you know what it's like when you're young and you're trying to get into the industry you want to get into, and they say, well, what experience have you got? And it's like, well, I don't have any experience. I'm trying to get my first job. Well, we don't want you. So it's that kind of vicious circle that lots of people find themselves in. So I thought, well, they kind of know me there now, so I have a chance. So I sent off the application, got an interview, went up there in a horrible bright blue shirt, which was the only shirt I owned. Went up to Nottingham, which is obviously that's where they're based, and had the interview. And I think they just wanted to meet the person who sent all these weird submissions. I don't think there's anything to do with my CV or my brilliant personality. I think it was just, who's this weirdo who sent in these painted submissions? But then they offered me the job, and it was very exciting. So this is my first. It was my first publishing job, and I've been in publishing ever since, in one way or another. So it was fortuitous that it came along at that time, and I was employed as assistant editor for the Black Library.
Right, yeah.
When it was, and I don't think it had been. I'm trying to work out how long it had been around. You probably already know at that point, but it would have been around about 2003. I joined.
Okay, yeah.
So whether they'd been around they've been around a few years, but
About
not
6 years, I
long.
think.
Was it about
More.
6 years?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So still, laying the foundations and everything. So it was an exciting time to come in, and I was very pleased. Had to move up to Nottingham from London, but but that's where they are. So that's where I had to go. So
Right.
that was my first publishing job, and great place to work.
Because what would the responsibilities of that job have been then? So, because obviously Inferno is running at the time. Was it
Yeah.
just Inferno, or were there other things you were working on as well?
Oh, there was a lot of stuff going on at the time. There was a lot. It was so I was employed I applied for and was employed as an assistant editor. Now, an assistant editor normally is, obviously it's a very junior role. It's an entry level role. It was my kind of thought, well, I'm going to go there and I'm going to be under lots of people's purview, and they're going to be looking after me, teaching me the job, and I'll be doing all sorts of things. But I didn't really know exactly what I'd be doing because I'd never done it before. I knew nobody who worked in publishing. So it was all a bit of a mystery. But I thought, it's an entry level job. Clearly they're going to look after me. And they did look after me. That makes it sound really bad. But anyway, the point is, when I got there, I was assistant editor, but I was also told that you are also special projects manager or special projects editor. This is also your job, which we didn't tell you about in the interview. Okay. And also, we're not going to pay you for as such. This is another load of stuff you're going to have to do. And that basically involved all of the unusual books, like the special books that they did. So the sort of the in-universe stuff. Right. So not the comics, not the short stories, and not the novels. So that's what Black Library did. They had a monthly comic, which I haven't got any copies of. They did Inferno. They did a whole range of novels in both universes, and they were beginning to do merchandise as well. So, but I was going to basically be put in charge of all of the in-universe stuff. So not the fiction, but the kind of stuff that was, of the world.
Sure.
So the Liber books, which you probably have heard of, I came in the second Liber Chaotica book.
Right.
Do you know the Liber Chaotica books?
Sure, yeah. So there's one per god, wasn't there?
That's
and then
right.
ultimately they did a undivided.
They did a big fat one. Yeah. So I came in at the second one. Richard Williams wrote the first one, and then I came in the second one. So basically I was just given a whole load more responsibility and a whole range of things to run, which included things like making mugs, posters, all sorts of stuff. And I knew nothing about any of this, nothing at all. Obviously, there were people looking after me. I had a manager. Mark Gascoigne was obviously the publisher. He was sort of he was my superior, so he knew what I was up to. But essentially, I had to do everything that an assistant editor does, and then all of this other stuff as well. So it was I was thrown in at the deep end,
Sure.
and it felt a little bit overwhelming. But at the same time, it was great because suddenly I was like doing all this really, really cool stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And I had to learn on the job, and no other job has felt as difficult since then because I know more, but also because normally I've been given the job that I was given rather than this job. Oh, we're going to give you all this stuff to do as well. But that was kind of what Black Library was like. It was very scrappy. It was very kind of everyone mucking in together, everyone sort of doing everything and helping each other out. It was very much a team effort. So I wasn't like abandoned, but it was hard. It was very, very difficult for someone who was, totally inexperienced and very young and not super confident. But yeah, it was great. It was good. I never complained because I thought, well, this is an opportunity. And obviously I love the work and I love the universes that I was working with. So I never complained about it. It's just how it was, it's just, that's what happened, and you get on with it, don't you? Get on with things.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's fascinating because obviously, well, from the outside, it's always seemed like Black Library was, it's part of Games Workshop. Games Workshop knows what it's doing. It's doing all this amazing stuff. There's loads of amazing books and products coming out from Black Library. So yeah, it definitely, when you're outside looking in, does seem like this kind of monolithic mega company sort of project. But
Yeah.
the more you sort of hear about within it, it is just a small number of people who are sort
Yeah.
of, creating all of this amazing stuff and running all these different projects at the same time. It sounds like it would be challenging as an environment to work in, but also rewarding.
Yeah, both of those things definitely, and that's the best. I think that's a great place to be challenged, but also to be doing stuff that you really care about. I mean, I don't know what it's like now because I've not worked there for a long time, and it's obviously grown since then. I mean, this is like 22 years ago. Now it's a much bigger, more profitable company doing so many more things, like TV shows and loads of video games. Back then it was pretty much just the board game, the odd video game that came out, but not very many. I think I've got Mark of Chaos, which is one of the last books I worked on. That was probably one of the first video games, probably, if I remember rightly. But yeah, it seems like that from the outside, but actually when you're in it, it's human beings doing the best they can with not enough people, not enough money, not enough time, which is how it is for, certainly in publishing, but probably how it is for most people. At least that's how it felt. But everyone was really passionate about it. Everyone loved it. Everyone who worked there, they didn't get paid as much as they would have liked. Who does? But they did it because they love it. They were passionate about this, about the universe, the characters, everything like that. So I'd much rather get not enough money but love the job than get loads of money and hate going into work every day. That would just be much, much worse to me. I've always thought that. And working at Black Library, yeah, it was, yeah, but in the early days, or the early-ish days, it was everyone mucked in. Everyone was like, right, how the hell do we make, who do we get to make our mugs? How do we make an A1 poster? How are we gonna mark? Because I don't think we had a marketing department. I was trying to think about this earlier on. I think we had to do all our own marketing and adverts and everything. I don't think we had a marketing department. So all of that stuff we just had to do ourselves.
Right.
And yeah, it was high pressure because you know what it's like when you've got 50 things to do. When you've got 50 things to do, that there's 30 things you've forgotten and 20 more under that you've really forgotten, and they're going to come to the surface any moment and go, why haven't you done this? And that's where my anxiety dreams come from.
Sure. Amazing. Was it that sort of the special projects side of things? That's been quite an enduring. The work that you did in that space has been really enduring. It's quite still popular and much sought after this day. Because that was where you were working on things like the uplifting primer, the Imperial Infantryman's uplifting primer, right?
Yes,
so like these really fascinating because, like you say, they are in-universe text, aren't they? They're from the perspective of someone within 40k or Warhammer Fantasy.
Exactly.
Was that something that I mean, I know you were saying that you were surprised to get that particular bit of responsibility, but given that you were submitting, like when the open submissions, you're sending in these in-universe artifacts.
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
generate
Yeah, yeah,
curiosity.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
It's quite a good fit there, actually, isn't there? Ultimately,
I'd never thought of that before, Jordan. And you're absolutely right. Maybe they thought, well, actually, he could do this because he's clearly in the universe, in his brain. So yeah, I'd never made that connection. But you've this is like psychology. You've got to the roots of me here.
So
Yeah,
how
I'm
many
sure. Yeah.
was the Imperial Infantryman's uplifting practice? Was that the first one of those after the Liber Chaoticas that you were doing?
It was one of the earlier ones. I mean, I can't remember how far along the Liber series we were because it was lifted. The idea was Dan Abnett's. It's a mention in one of his Gaunt's Ghost books. He just mentions in one of the early ones he has his copy of the Imperial Infantryman's uplifting primer, and I don't think it's ever mentioned again. Like I don't think it's just one of his little things he came up with. Dan Abnett being one of the big writers that they had, who's one brilliant writer, fantastic. I really enjoyed working with him, reading all of his books. And I think Mark Gascoigne, it was his idea. I'm sure it was probably his idea to let's make that. That's perfect for for special projects. And me being a little sort of hustler, I thought, well, I'm going to try and pitch to write this as well as edit it, which is the perfect position to write and edit your own stuff because you have much more control over it. So I pitched to it and managed to convince Marco to actually let me write it and get paid for it because it was a freelance project. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, but there were many brilliant writers who did the in-universe stuff. I was in very good company. The Marianne von Stauffer, who did the Liber Chaoticas, the last two Liber Chaoticas, and loads of really great writers. So I was in sort of esteemed company. I sort of looked up to all these guys really because I'd only done 2 stories, and I always felt that everyone else was far more advanced. But yeah, it was good. It was fun to work on it. Really, really fun. It's a lovely little item, and I see it on eBay every now and again. And it's it was fun. It was fun to write that one.
Yeah, I mean, but that comes across like within the text as well. But like, how did you? I mean, were you literally just creating stuff whole cloth, or were you going back and researching everything that was out there, or like how do you approach an in-universe text? Like, where's the starting point for that?
That's a really good question, and everyone probably has a slightly different approach. And obviously, you have to start with the games workshop. That's the originator of the idea. So you always, of course, you have to bear everything like that in mind, and anything that they've already created. So obviously, I'd go through all the Gaunt's Ghost stuff. I'd go through all of the codexes, any mention of Imperial Guard, any mention of the equipment that they used, poring over the pictures to see what sort of things they've got on their uniforms, trying to get as much of the kind of really nitty gritty detail. Because the thing about this is I can ignore story. There's no story, there's no plot, there's no characterization. It's all it's information, and it's stuff that you have to draw from the universe and gather as much of it as you possibly can. But an awful lot of the inspiration for this particular project came from our world, the real world. I kind of trawled eBay for real soldiers' primers and soldiers' handbooks and military handbooks and strategy handbooks and guides and identity cards. And I bought all sorts of weird books off eBay. One book about military medical manual, so things like how to sort of bind a wound or do a tourniquet and battle medicine, that kind of thing. And it wasn't just the information that they have in there, but it's also the sort of the style of the writing that was really important to nail. Obviously, it's in universe. You can't mess around with the style. It's got to be 40K. It has to be in that voice. And so I took real military stuff, which is obviously very dry, it's just information, and it's normally written in a very clear way, so anyone can understand it. It's important that anyone can actually read and understand this stuff. So I took all inspiration from all of these different things, but then I also, when I started thinking about the contents of it, how it would be split up, and that obviously that helps to organize things. But the main worry I had with it was because it's your cat.
Yes, Martha's involved again. Yeah, that's right.
Tail ago. The only thing that I was worried about was because obviously it's a military manual. It's the style has to be quite dry, and it has to be informative. There can be no jokes in it, you know, then no humor whatsoever. It has to be in character. And I was worried, oh God, I don't want to write something that's just going to be really boring to read. So I made sure that it was sort of, I tried to make sure that it was full of that kind of 40k black humor, dark, completely deadpan humor. Obviously it's not trying to be funny, but I wanted it to be quite funny. If you know 40k, you'll be able to read this and hopefully chuckle a little bit. Like, because obviously I had to make up a lot of stuff, because most of this stuff isn't in any of the novels or anything. It's, you know, I had to make up most of this.
Yeah.
Because there's so much detail. And so, for example, like all of the infractions, there's pages of infractions, and nearly every single one is punishable by death. Because it's 40k, of course. Yeah. It's like one that isn't, you know, like one tiny thing you do wrong, and you may not get killed for that. You might just get, I don't know, like thrown into solitary for 2 years, whatever. I can't remember. And then one of the bits, one of the just little things. I mean, obviously, a lot of the information is, you know, lifted straight from the codexes, like for the armor and the weapons and things. But there's also other little things like, where is it? I found it this morning, where it was just, I'll find it in a minute. Sorry, you can edit this bit out, can't you? When I'm looking through, here we go. Just a blank space that just says, keep this space clear, do not deface on pain of death. And I don't know why that blank space is there, but obviously the Imperium knows, and if you move and if you mark it, you're going to get killed. And it was just stuff like that, you know, I wanted to put in. And every single page has to be in universe. The only thing that we didn't have in universe was the imprint page. Everything else is, and it was a joy to work on, you know, and obviously working with the artists as well. But it was great, and I'm very proud of it. And because I think it does what it's supposed to do. I think most people would read this and think, yeah, this feels like something a trooper would have in their breast pocket, and never read because they're too busy fighting orcs or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it absolutely succeeds in that. I think it very much is. It feels like it is of the world.
Yeah, which is my main goal.
Yeah. Which, and I think that's why it's also still so highly sought after. And like you say, it's on eBay, and sometimes it can be heart-stoppingly expensive. I think it really really goes for some big numbers. But then, in fact,
I think when I went freelance for the first time, which basically meant when I was unemployed for quite a long period of time, this is a long time ago, I actually had to sell some of my copies just to sort of, you know, I didn't get loads, I didn't get hundreds of pounds, but I made like 50, 60 quid on some of them, but I've still got a few left. But I was that desperate for money, I had to kind of sell a few copies, which is awful. But yeah, so they paid my rent like a couple of times.
Because the sort of Warhammer equivalents are also quite rare now and quite sought after, which are the Life of Sigmar and the Witch Hunter's Handbook. Both of which, I mean, my personal favorite. I absolutely love the Life of Sigmar. It's fantastic. But that's like the closest thing you would get to a Bible within the Empire, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Was it a similar approach to creating that book?
Yes, it was. First of all, I will say that the Witch Hunter's Handbook I didn't write.
Right.
I think I might be wrongly credited, maybe on Amazon or something. I'm not really sure, but that was actually written by Darius Hinks.
Okay, sure, yes, and Darius has done quite a lot of other similar work as well, right?
Yeah. He's I think he still writes for GW. He's done a lot of novels and things, and he used to be the designer. So I worked with him when he was head of design in the Black Library,
right?
So, and I think the Witch Hunter's Handbook was his first one, and it's really brilliant. Yeah. No, that's all right. That's okay. I think it's been wrongly attributed, because I think Graham McNeil is down as one of the authors of this, possibly somewhere.
Possibly.
And all this, I can't remember, but you know, these things get cross-wired in the internet, don't they? But yeah, Life of Sigmar, I think, was a similar thing. I think I must have gone through all the codexes again and picked all the stories that exist of Sigmar, and there must be color text and histories. I mean, I can't quite remember where I got it from. I assume I would have got it from the Warhammer rulebook. And then, it was basically just a case of turning them into what would have been, as you say, almost like a Bible, like a holy book carried around by priest of Sigmar, I guess. And that was really fun, because I just had to write it in almost like as Beowulf, you know, again, quite straight, you know, like not much flourish, not much humor, But these are stories, of course, so it's very different beasts to this. This is information, essentially information is it presented hopefully in an interesting and fun way, but these are short stories essentially, or fables and myths. So it's all quite kind of melodramatic and big and epic, and big, lots of battles, and this was fun to write. I like writing to a style. I find it easier than just write something in my own style is harder, because writing to a style where you know what the rules are, you've got these guidelines and you have to work within them. And I quite like that. I find that weirdly freeing, because there are fewer decisions to make as a writer, because well, it has to sound like this. It has to be like this, and if you get it wrong, you'll know, and then you can change it, or the editor will know and you can change it. So yeah, and I think one of the reasons they're so sought after is because I think they probably only ever did one print run. They did a second edition of this, which you probably know about.
Yes, they did.
Which I wrote in another edition. But usually they did one print run, which wouldn't have been very big. So they become quite sought after for that reason, I think, because once they tended to sell out and go quite quickly, and then that was it. So then suddenly you're on eBay. And they're just nice. They're just lovely little objects.
They're really beautifully made. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of care and attention given to the form of the actual book.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. It wasn't just the words and the artwork. It was the format. Like, we had to kind of shop around for someone who could make a book in this format and put the right covering on and get the stamp right. Everything has to look great. I mean, we sort of resented having to put this on the back, because that ruins it. It's like, we don't want that on the back, because it's not of the world. But obviously you have to make some compromises to the real world, don't you? Which is a bit of a shame, but we have to do that. So yeah, it is. Yeah, it was fun, really, really fun, and a great way to learn how to write, really. And I wasn't working alone. Obviously, working with the illustrators as well. That was great, because I was editing them, so I got to choose the illustrations and choose the artists. So I had a lot more control over these books than I've had any other book working as an editor in any other company, because everything tends to be more split out. Whereas with Black Library, you could have more control. You could alter things more, which is you end up not necessarily with something which is better, but something that was more your vision.
Right.
You see what I mean? Usually an auteur's vision is normally stronger than something done by committee. So yeah, these are very much. I'm very proud of them, and it's nice. It's really nice to hear someone saying that they like them too, because I don't get much feedback, really.
I think a lot of people really like them. I think they're much loved, to be honest. Just the way they're still talked about online. Yeah, and especially given, like you say, there's so few copies out there. And yes, obviously collectors like to find these things and keep hold of these things, but there's also a lot of desire to be able to read it and sort of partake in it, because it is such a fun exploration of these worlds that you don't always get.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the rule books. I mean, the rule books have the little snapshots of little bits of color text, which was what inspired me when I was a kid. It was those in-universe bits of text that I love. So, in actually being able to get a chance to actually write a whole book of it was not far off a dream come true, really, and to get paid for it as well. So, this is all bringing back a lot of very happy memories to me talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just obviously in the sort of editorial capacity, were you party to any of the conversations around like why there would have been a limited run? Was that just a business reality? We can only invest so much money, or like what led to there just being shorter runs on that sort of thing?
It's a really good question, and I think it's something that every single publisher, not just Black Library, these are big decisions that we make. Any even if you're doing the latest Dan Brown, how many millions do we do? And with this one, it will be how many thousands do we do? But it's guesswork. It really is. You kind of think, how popular is this going to be? We know, because these are quite expensive to print. Not like a novel. Like a novel at the time probably was just like a few pence per copy, maybe 20p per copy. This may have been over £1. And that's a lot, because obviously it's a lot more finished and there's more stuff going on, and it's this weird format. And the smaller the print run, usually the more expensive each individual item is. So you're going to get less profit for each one that's sold. But then again, you don't want to have a warehouse full of 3,000 books that you're never going to sell. So it's all a kind of it's a bit, as you say, it's a business decision, and it's guesswork, educated guesswork. You can kind of think, I reckon we'll sell in these many, and then they sell out in a week, and it's like, fuck, yeah, that's annoying. Or they completely confound expectations and they don't sell very well at all, and that's disappointing. And you're left with a load of books that aren't going to sell. So yeah, and Marco was very much on top of that kind of thing as the publisher. We were quite a young team for the most part. So, and he'd had a lot more experience than, I mean, I had none. I had no idea. So I was learning as I went along. But so yeah, I think these were probably limited to, I don't know, within no more than 20,000, probably fewer than that, I would think. Right. Certainly for this one, but I can't really remember. But it wouldn't have been huge numbers. And the special edition books, like the normal ones, like the Loathsome Ratmen, the standard editions. We did limited editions too, which I'm sure you're aware of. But the standard editions, we'd probably do a few thousand, but I don't think we ever reprinted them. And some would do brilliantly, other ones not so well. And we'd always keep an eye on sales. That's obviously, you learn by doing these things. But yeah, it's just a risk. You just take a punt and go, let's just hope it does well. You have faith in everything you do. You never start a project thinking this is rubbish. But when it comes down to it, it's all down to the people out there. But with Games Workshop, of course, you've got this fan base who are interested. You've got a big advantage over normal publishers who are just selling to Joe Public. Games Workshop and Black Library have a rabid fan base of people who are interested in everything. And yeah, and they're more like, so that's good. And you know exactly who to market to. So big advantages, but yeah, it's a difficult decision. But sure. Black Library is still around, so they're,
of course, yeah,
and so they're doing a lot. They're doing it right. They're getting it right for the most part. Yeah.
Were there any obviously those particular projects were I'm sure exciting to work on and great fun. Were there any other projects or authors that you were working on or with that were like really exciting and that you remember fondly?
There are lots. Most of the things I worked on. I'm going to tell you one project that was a nightmare. If you'd like to hear that,
yeah.
Because I was thinking about it this morning, looking through your questions again, and thinking, oh, that's a good question, because there's lots of things I can talk about with great affection and enthusiasm, and I'm happy to do that. But there was one project that was just so nightmarish, and like most of these things, it began as something which we thought would be easy. So it was when we were doing a book. Where are we? Here we are. With Dan Abnett. This was his first in-universe book, as far as I can remember, the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. So this was the in-universe book about the Gaunt's ghosts, sort of, the part of the conflict that they were involved in, the Sabbat Worlds. I'm sure you know all about this, and I'm not sure people who watch this will know about it. So the book was great to work on. Dan Abnett obviously is a brilliant writer. He'd created this wonderful sort of group of people and his whole section of 40k that we could just use and make this really good book from. But I think it was Marco's idea, and he suggested that for one of our special projects, merchandise ideas, we do a massive star map of the Sabbat Worlds, sort of, that section of the galaxy. And we thought, well, that should be fairly straightforward, but I think it was A1. It was big wall poster. But that involved me having to ask poor Dan to basically go through all of his books and get every single reference to planets, star clusters, comets, moons, whatever he'd mentioned in all of his books, and then try and work out where it would go in a sort of a star map. And it was a nightmare, because it's like, we didn't really know how to make a star map. I mean, it's 3D for a start. It's not flat, is it? It's kind of it's a 3D area, and so trying to place all these things, and then realizing that we've not got enough stars. So I had to fill in a lot of, I had to make up a lot of names, and I've got a copy of it. But my mum and dad, it's a bit I can't show you. But although, to be honest, we wouldn't be able to fit it on the screen. And I think Dan realized after he'd offered to do it, or how he said, oh yeah, I'll do that for no money. I think he realized quite quickly that it was going to take him a long time. And he was a busy writer, but we'd already committed to making this thing. And that was the other thing. We had had very little budget, so I couldn't pay him. So we had to kind of rely on the goodness of his heart to do this. And then I had to help him. And it was, I felt guilty, even though it wasn't my idea, but I was the one who had to make him do it. And but we did it in the end. And I don't know how well it sold, but actually, I don't know whether you can see, this is a tiny little part of it.
Right.
As you can see, planet names there. I think there's another one in here where you can see it as well. But it was, yeah, there's another sort of behind. This is all part of it.
Right.
And it all had to be designed and put together by Darius. I would think he probably had to do that. And it was, you just sort of thought, oh, this will be easy. We can bang this out and bang 250 out, get, you know, a couple of thousand quid into the coffers, easy. But it was a nightmare. So yeah, that there were things, but that was Black Library. We thought, well, it was full of ideas. Well, let's just try this. Let's do this. Let's do that. And most of the time, everything was fine. But sometimes it was, we should never have set foot in this particular thing. But that's pretty much the only thing. And most of the time, it was just fun stuff. It was just mugs and T-shirts and cool books, really, working with great writers and great artists. And yeah, so something I loved doing was this was a fun one, Xenology.
Right.
So this was, I think it was Simon Spurrier, who's science fiction. Yeah, Cy Spurrier, who writes a lot of science fiction and comics and things. So he sort of started out at the Black Library or did a lot of his early work there. And this was really fun because it was just full of wonderful sort of diagrams and gruesome autopsies of various alien beings. But this was the freedom we had because obviously Games Workshop creates a lot of stuff, but Black Library had to create tons of stuff because it's all stories. And of course, the more you create, the more it adds to the GWIP. And sometimes you might get things that they didn't necessarily agree with or want because they have to think of the future, because obviously Games Workshop are thinking about, well, what have we got now? Nothing can break canon now, but also nothing can break canon for the stuff we're going to do in the future. And Black Library was churning out new stuff because it has to, because it's stories and in universe. But I made up tons of stuff. We all did. We all had to make up loads of stuff, and there was always that risk that suddenly Anna Merritt or someone would come storming into the office and just say, "What have you done with this?" Now we can't. There was always that slight kind of tension, thinking, "What if we make something that's going to break Games Workshop?"
Were there ever any instances of like that kind of canon conflict that was sort of brought to your attention and flagged?
So I can't think of anything. I can't remember anything big that happened. I'm sure it probably would have done. There was an incident. Well, there was. It comes back to this more troublesome project, not just the map, but the book itself. And this, what I'm going to say to you now, is a bit of an insight in what it was like to work on these books for me and the rest of the team. For the most part, it was really fun and it was incredibly creative. And some of that creativity was born out of the fact that we didn't have enough time and we didn't have enough money. Obviously art is expensive, and the profit margins are so tight on these books that you couldn't break your art budget, because if you break your art budget by too much, then even if you sell every copy, profits are really going to be down. So you have to be really, really careful. So the art for good business reasons, art budgets were limited, which meant that we could only get, well, I don't know how many images, but certainly nowhere near enough images commissioned to fill a book. Nowhere near enough. Not for a book like this. I think they were like 96 pages. So the design department had to do an awful lot of the heavy lifting. They had to design and create an awful lot of images and maps and graphs and all that kind of thing. But with this one, it was very image heavy. But because of the nature of the book, it being a kind of a war report written by a general at the time, you're sort of limited in what you can include in it. You can't really have lots and lots of paintings or sketches, which meant we couldn't use a lot of the kind of archive material from, the guys who worked in Games Workshop for the codexes and all the wonderful concept art that they did, because you'd have to find a way of explaining why is there a painting of something in a book that should really be sort of it's like photographs, because it's 40k, and so you have to think of a reason. Well, why is this? And eventually you're going to run out of reasons why it's full of illustrations and not photographs, or the 40k equivalent of a photograph. So we basically had to trawl the net and find like photographs, like for example this one, if you can see that, is probably just a picture of like, I don't know, Olympus Mons on Mars or something, but then we doctor it. And so we just take all of this free imagery, like, oh God, I mean, look at that. There's someone with some kind of frostbite.
Right.
You see that there's a foot there. So we
Right.
had to pull all of these images off the internet to try and fill the space. And usually what we would do is if we would find an image that we could use, and then often, oh yeah, so interestingly, this is one of the books that I used to research the primer.
Huh.
So it was like a soldier's notebook, which I bought off the internet, but we reused in this book. And usually what we would do is we'd just stick an Aquila on it to make it look like it's 40k. Usually the answer was just stick an Aquila on it and it looks like it's 40k. And it's full of these photographs,
Right.
which we had to add in because we had no money. We had to improvise. It was very creative. Because also you're on a time, there's no time.
Of course, yeah.
Everyone's working on about 100 different things, and all of this stuff takes time. So you have to bang it out. We had to probably like maybe 100 images in here that we had to kind of create from. I bought in an ammunition box, which I've got down there actually, and we put an Aquila on it, and that's in one of the margins. And we just stick an Aquila on everything,
Sure.
And we were kind of not separate, but we were generating a lot of IP, and the senior people in War Games Workshop couldn't look at everything we did, so we had to kind of make sure that we didn't mess around with it too much. So that was yeah, so we were always treading a bit of a line. I think we just had to be really careful. I'm sure things got nixed. I'm sure that people would have some things that perhaps in the novels, because obviously the novels is full of stuff. And sometimes they probably would have gone, actually, you can't do this because we've not developed this, so you can't, because it becomes canon, and that's that. It's like we had to find a way of reprinting Space Marine, because everyone, was it or Inquisitor, because everyone is fascinated by those books, the Ian Watson ones that came out way before Black Library.
Yeah,
and we reprinted them, but I think Mark Gascoigne had to think of a way of making it so this isn't canon. This is some heretical text, but it was a way that we could still put it out there and make some money, because they are really good books, and satisfy the fan base. I'm sure have you read the Ian Watson ones?
Only the first one. I've still got the rest on my reading list, but yeah, it's very fun and very of their time, I suppose.
Yeah, really weird, really
quite weird.
Very weird.
Yeah.
But I thought they were great.
Great, a lot of creativity in there for sure.
Very creative and very very divergent from Games Workshop. But he was a proper science fiction writer, wasn't he? So he wasn't going to just stick with. He was not like me, staying very much within the lines. He was all over the place. He didn't care about the lines. But it was great. I don't want to kind of give us an impression that it was a brilliant job, and it was a great place to work, and all the people there. Mark Gascoigne as the publisher was very inspiring, and because you've spoken to him, haven't you? You've interviewed him.
Yes, I've interviewed Mark. Yeah, really. So many amazing stories, and has been involved in so much stuff for Games Workshop and Black Library over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Really yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, because I always find it really interesting with the canonicity of it. Like, there is a sort of tacit acceptance that whilst everything is broadly canon, it's also not. So like there's a primacy to the tabletop games where that is first and foremost. That is the official canon, and then there's kind of tiers of canonicity underneath that, where they're canon until they're not. They're canon until something in the game takes precedence. It's seems to be the way of doing
it. I suppose that has to happen, doesn't it? Because it's been going for so long, and they do have to keep things fresh and change things, so things naturally kind of fall by the wayside. But I think at that time, Black Library just had to be a little bit careful that it didn't. That was the impression I got. But I was only there for about 3 years, so and I'm way out of it now. So what it's like now, I really don't know. But it might be worth trying to get in touch with Darius Hinks actually, as one of their main writers, and maybe he'd like to do you might want to have a chat.
Yeah, I'd love to chat to Darius. Yeah, I think that'd be really great.
Lovely guy, really, really lovely guy.
Yeah. Well, when you moved on from Games Workshop, you sort of took a quite a different path, actually, didn't you? So what was sort of, where did you go next from Black Library?
So I went down. I moved back down to London, and I stayed in publishing, but I went into educational publishing for kids,
right.
And then moved into children's fiction as quickly as I possibly could. And there I've been ever since, really, children's fiction as an editor across various different publishers, but as a writer as well. And now I do mostly not all non-fiction, but fiction and non-fiction for mostly for children. But I do some books for adults as well. What have I got here? Geeky stuff. I worked for Python books for a while, so I wrote this
Right.
sort of art books for video games and films. So I edited lots of these as well. Have you heard of Titan books?
Yes, of course. Yeah, they
Yeah,
do a lot of the UK. Well, they did do a lot of the UK republications of like comic books and movie
that's right.
tie-ins and all sorts
Yeah,
of stuff,
that's it.
didn't they?
Movies and video game tie-ins and TV
Right.
shows. I worked there for a few years.
Right.
And but then I gone back into children's fiction as well. So, but still with a love of the sort of the dark and the esoteric and science fiction and fantasy. That's never gone away. I do still love that. And when I get a chance to write it or edit it, I always take it because it's just fun, isn't it? It's fun.
Because you've also done. I'm right that you've done like illustrated retellings of like myths and legends and stuff like that as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Hold on one sec. Yeah. Yeah, so clearly, obviously, Sigmar and the Empire and Space Wolves and all that sort of thing were heavily inspired by the Norse myths.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a really fun book of just retelling Norse myths, which for children, but I mean, it can be enjoyed by anybody. Really brilliant artwork.
Yeah.
And so really wonderful stuff like that. And I did, actually, before I forget, no, hang on. No, we'll sit to the point.
Okay.
Don't let me forget. There's one thing I really want to mention to you because I think you'll be interested. And then this is the most fun book one of the most fun books is this one, which is retellings of horror stories, which is essentially my happy place because I just got to retell Dracula and Edgar Allan Poe and Little Red Riding Hood, and it was just the most fun. And it's all illustrated as well. So that's not. It is kind of for kids, but it's incredibly. They let me be very, very violent. And there's Games Workshop in here because it shares that love of the gothic and the darkness, and which is what really spoke to me when the old Warhammer world, which is all kind of craggy and dark and misty and which is what I love, and it all feeds into that sort of horror aesthetic. But the thing I wanted to mention was you may not know. I know you know far more about Games Workshop, but this is one thing you might not know. So it'd be interesting to know if you do. Did you ever see any of these editions of the Dan Abnett books?
No, I haven't. No.
No, I'd completely forgotten that we'd done this when I was at Black Library, but this one came with a soundtrack.
Right.
There's a CD, and it was composed by a guy called John Bergin, who's a composer and an artist, I think. So he's gone on to do really big things, and he did 12 songs that you could listen to while reading Traitor General by Dan Abnett.
Right.
And I was listening to it this morning, going, I'd completely forgotten we'd done that. Completely forgotten, and I just thought I'll have a little look. And oh yeah, we did a soundtrack. So Black Library back then did everything: mugs, T-shirts, posters, and CD soundtracks as well.
Fantastic! Yeah, that's great, and that is a really fun idea though, and something different, something quite unique.
Yeah, I think again it was Mark Gascoigne's idea. I think he knew John Bergen, and it was his brainchild. You've spoken to him, so you know that he's just this very creative. He loves everything that's unusual, and he'll kind of come up with things and get them sorted, get them done. So he coming up, doing that and getting it sorted, and just let's do a soundtrack for a book. Why not? Why not? And it's actually really good as well.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I mean, incredible time and so many amazing stories, and I really appreciate you, Matt, taking us through some of those times and some of those stories. It's been great to chat. Thank you so much.
No, it's been as I said, it was really nice to go down memory lane because it's a long time ago, and I'm always slightly disturbed by what I don't remember. but there are bits that I do remember, and those bits, they're very happy times, and I learned so much. Like, as I said, no job's ever felt quite so challenging, but in a good way. Since then, I learned a lot, and I love the books, and it's nice that people still enjoy them. I feel I've made a very small mark on the Games Workshop history, along with all the amazing people that I worked with. It was very much a team. Christian Dunn, Darius Hinks, and everyone else that worked there. Lindsay Priestley, who was in charge of novels at the time. So, I don't know what most of them are doing now, but hopefully they're probably surrounded by the books too, and they still look at them every now and again and go, "Oh, we did a soundtrack."
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you, Matt. That's great.
Pleasure. Take care now.
Massive thanks to Matt for joining me to chat about his time at the Black Library and his work there. It was so interesting. I really, really enjoyed it. If you would like to find out more about what Matt is currently working on, you can follow the link in the description to his website. There's some really interesting stuff there, so do check it out. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to hear more conversations with the folks who helped to build Games Workshop and Warhammer over the years, then you can just search for In Conversation with Jordan Sorcery wherever you get your podcasts. YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, pretty much everywhere. And if you would like to support my work researching and documenting the history of Games Workshop, then you can do so at patreon.com/Jordan Sorcery, where you'll find loads of exclusive material, exclusive interviews, written and recorded, and loads of articles, blog posts, and reviews and other stuff as well that hopefully you'll enjoy. Plus, it is the best way to help ensure that I continue to do this kind of work. So thank you for any support you can offer. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.